So there's a controversy right now that has erupted over how government is managing your pension funds. And that has led to an ultimatum by the workers to the government as far as the pension funds are concerned. We are talking about some 700,000 workers who are currently agitating that government is mismanaging their pension funds. But is that really the case? This is a significant number of workers indeed. We're talking about all workers in the public sector coming together to make the point. So we wanted to pause for a second and re-examine in quite some great detail what really is the problem or is the challenge with the pension funds that government deducts from your salaries at the end of the month. That's why we're having this conversation. This is about your future and mine as well. Is everything okay? Is your money safe? Is a question we're going to be asking tonight. Now, I also want to show you this June 2023 issue, which is the ultimatum that has been put forth by the workers, ending on Friday. And they've been absolutely clear that if by this particular date that the government had not paid back to them what they are owed in terms of the contributions that they've done, the workers say they were going to be advising themselves. And this ultimatum is just 2 days away, by the way. So this is important. If we're talking about 700,000 workers all laying down their tools by Friday or post that, because they'll have to reconvene, that means we're possibly going to grind this country to a halt. And that is why this conversation must be had. And let's unpack a few of the things. What really are their issues? And why are they very unhappy with what is happening? Because government is already, as you know, deducting some 5% from their salaries every month. And that amount of money goes into the government accounts that then it's then used to, in essence, put together for the workers when they retire. They tap into that, and you can now go home and retire in peace. And this is how it's supposed to work. You have the money that is then deducted. The GOG takes a 5% of that. It's supposed to now be going to the privately managed trustees' account. The funds are then invested on behalf of the workers, which the workers say, so we know it's been invested. If it has been invested, where is the money right now? And there's a fundamental question the workers are asking. So where is the money? Where are the funds that have been invested? If you look really at the data that we've seen from the National Pension Regulatory Authority, it tells a very interesting story. And this is just opening up the pensions conversation beyond just the tier 2. We're now talking about also the SNCC pensions that we talk about. And this is a comparison, right? What you see above there, the line from 84% to 55% is the tier 2 pensions. And we're talking about tier 2 pensions now, by the way. The blue line is what you see with SNCC. And the National Pensions Regulatory Authority tells us that the tier 2 pensions are performing far better in terms of the investment, but also most people, 55% of all the pensions that we have is in there, right? And so this is important. This is why that huge chunk of money and the workers are demanding they give us accountability for it. And the National Pension Regulatory Authority explains why you see that the SNCC line trending downwards and the line that has to do with tier 2 investments trending upwards, because there's a bit more in terms of its ability to yield, but its performance as far as a pensions investment is doing way better. And they tell us a few things, that the SNCC pensions isn't performing as well because of indebtedness by private entities. Of course, as you know, some entities aren't paying their contributions, and the public employees also, they're not paying the contributions. So that is limiting the pool available to SNCC. And you look at also the rise in payment of benefits over the period. You're paying a lot of benefits now, so there's little money in the pool. You talk about the unfavorable investment outcomes that we've seen SNCC put their money into some investments that have not yielded much when it comes to the end of it all. But then you also look at this metric here. I found it very interesting. For every 1 cedi that SNCC has to pay out, This metric is measuring how much more CDs do they have to cover that, assuming they are not getting new contributions, right? And the more CDs they have to pay the one CD that they have to pay out, the better SSNIT is performing. And if you look at that metric there, it's been trending downwards. It went up just in 2021 to 2 CDs 74 pesos, but came back down to 2 CDs 46 pesos. That tells you that the money saved so far from all the investments isn't at the threshold yet, that the closer you are to, say, 5 CDs, the better it is. You must have far more money available to pay out pensions, assuming you're not getting new contributions in, and that is a comparison there that the NPRA is telling us. And so, again, you begin to see the comparisons here. And, of course, 477 million is yet to be recovered. So everything isn't well with the pension sector. When you look at the Tier 1 and Tier 2, to be very specific. Tier 2 is where the workers are complaining about, but even the Tier 1, 2, there are key questions there to look at. And these are the total number of private pension schemes available that obviously are doing quite a bit of work with the monies that the government deducts on behalf of the workers that is then invested. And if you look at that trend going up, the informal sector is beginning to contribute a bit more when it comes to pensions, which is what you see in the consistent rise in the number of informal workers putting their money into pensions, all the way now up to 538,000 workers doing so. So this growth, how do you sustain it? But if you want to sustain this, then people must trust that when they take monies from the salaries and they put it down and they're ready to retire, they can go for that money, because it's their money, by the way. And that is fundamentally is the fight that the workers are having with government tonight. Let's sit with them and let's have a conversation. I'll also be talking to those who understand the sector so we can break this down a bit more. Stay with me. Thanks for staying with us. We're talking about your pensions, and it's something that I'm really looking forward to learning a bit more about, considering the controversy that has erupted between government and workers on the subject of Tier 2 pensions. PMSS is always brought to you by Syntex Tanks. It is strong, it is tough. Alomo Bitters has experienced greatness in every moment. Ghana AIDS Commission and Pepsodent. Every smile matters. And if you're looking for a tank to store water, you don't need to look any further, because it's Syntex Tanks. They have the first record indeed when it comes to the introduction of the double layer tank, and now you can have as many layers as you want. Syntex Tanks is first to introduce you to the white inner layer tanks in Ghana, and now they introduce you to the customer specs order, which lets you order any color and size of preference. Call them. They are across the country. They have 7 years warranty to 0244 335 168, or shop online at syntexhuge.com. Syntex Tanks are you're stronger, you're tough. Also, Pepsodent, they have the Pro-Fluoride and microcalcium ingredients, sealing tiny and invisible holes in your teeth. This prevents cavities, keeps your teeth strong and mouth healthy. Pepsodent cavity comes in 175G, family pack, all the way down to 12G sachets, so you can always get what you can afford at any time. That's Pepsodent. Every smile matters. My guest joining me tonight for a conversation is Angel Kabono. He's the president of the National Association of Graduate Teachers. He spoke at the press conference that laid out that ultimatum. Dr. Kwabena Nyako, too, is the director of research and policy at the TUC, as a Trades Union Congress. He also joins us. Franklin Kujo is the founding president of Imani Center for Policy and Education. And I'm looking forward to hearing Franklin's thought on this, because if you check through the archives, and I did, Imani has written quite extensively about the Tier 2 pensions. There are many alerts that I've seen telling us about everything that could go wrong. And I really wonder whether things have come full circle. They seem to be prophets sometimes, Imani. We'll tap into that when I get to hear from Franklin. Abdullah Mashood, Executive Director of the Africa Center for Retirement Research, is with me also in the studio. The man that does all the research when it comes to retirement is here, and so he knows a thing or two about this sector. And I invited him to join me. There's only one place to start, is Angel Kabono. Mr. Kabono, so first of all, what is the issue with your Tier 2 pensions?
Well, thank you very much, and good evening, Evans. Every month, the Controller and Accountant General's Department does deduction from workers' salaries into third-party destination. And the third-party destinations the following: SNCs, our Tier 2 funds, and also the dues that are collected for the various unions. Unfortunately, when these deductions are made, they are not transmitted immediately to their destination institutions. So, for example, with the Tier 2 funds, the last time government paid the Tier 2 funds was in June 2023. With the issues to do with our monthly dues that we use to run the union office, the last time the government transmitted funds was in December 2023. And I'm sure the situation is worse with our Tier 1, which is the SNCs mandatory contributions. So members are left vulnerable because if somebody retires, let's say today, and that person needs his invested funds, that person will collect his invested funds minus the money that is supposed to be collected from July 2023 to date. What it also means is that those monies have not been invested. So the worker does not get value for the contribution he or she makes, and the mandatory deductions that ought to be made on behalf of the worker or paid on behalf of the worker by the government of Ghana. So this is left the various schemes vulnerable because they are not getting the resources that they are supposed to get timeously, and their mandate is also being tempered with because they are not investing the money the way they are supposed to invest the money. And then the member on retirement is also going to be shortchanged because the months that are in arrears are money lost to the member. Now, secondly, if you collect dues, the dues that unions use in running the various unions, collect the dues, you don't pay the dues to the unions, how do you expect the unions to even run? So let us be true to facts. When government deducts people's monies for whatever purpose it is intended for, government should transmit the money immediately. This attitude of our government in this country, where statutory payments are not done on time, payment to third party is not done on time, and the government keeps deceiving itself as if the economy is balanced, is absolutely something that cannot be accepted. So we're giving them ultimatum to pay all monies that they have deducted or face the legitimacy of workers in this country.
Okay, and we'll try and rectify that audio because he keeps fading in and out. But he makes the point clearly that monies have been deducted, yes, but have not been paid to the private fund managers. So where's the money? And I want to get some clarity on that. And if the TUC maybe can give us an idea as to how much you're talking about here, the quantum involved. We have the head of research joining me on this. Do we know at all how much we are talking about here? When you're talking about Tier 2, Angel Kabonu says from June, that's the last time monies were paid. At the TUC, as far as you're concerned at the research level, do you have any idea how much is involved for 700,000 workers?
Okay, thank you. Before I answer that question, let me add something briefly to what Kabonu said. You see, the Tier 2 pension is what we call defined pension scheme. What you get at the end of your retirement is exactly how much you contributed plus interest. If you compare that to the SNCs pension scheme, it's defined contribution. So what you get out of it is actually defined in law. And sometimes it doesn't depend so much on how much it was invested. Okay. For Tier 2, what you get out of it is so dependent on your contribution plus investment. And if you know, it is just 5.5% of your basic pay. And that 5.5% is actually on this public sector pay, which we all know averagely is about 2,200. So it isn't that much. What it means is that for tier 2 pension, the actual benefit is in its ability to be able to invest long term on behalf of the worker. Now, if that investment is not coming because government is not paying, then you get into a situation where, as we see today, those retiring under the new pension scheme are receiving lower lump sum benefit compared to if they had retired under the old law. And remember that we reform pension, basically assuring workers that this reform will lead to a higher, better retirement income security for workers. Through no fault of theirs, 10 years down the line when people begin to retire, they are now receiving lower pension than we had promised them. Did we go or did we come?
You mean lower pensions than what they would have received under the old legal regime?
Yes, than if they had retired, the lower lump sum. So if you remember, we've made a lot of agitations about this, and somewhere in 2020, the president promised that workers that have received lower lump sum will receive a top-up from government. I think that was in November 2020, and we are in 2024. That money, that promise had not been delivered. So that, I just wanted to add that. So once you are not paying and the funds are not being invested, then we can foresee a situation where this shortfall in lump sum under the current law compared to the old law will persist longer than we had anticipated, because the monies are not being paid and they are not being invested on behalf of workers. Now, you're talking about the quantum.
How much is involved?
I cannot give you the exact amount, but you can be sure that for 700,000 workers, and if you look at the trajectory of the growth as you showed in your graphs, these are into millions, several millions of Ghana cedis on a monthly basis. So if it's from June up to the present, we are talking about several millions of Ghana cedis. I'm not able to give you the exact figure. But then the question is, where is the money? The money is with government. Government is government controller, a government agency, a department under the Ministry of Finance that actually deducted the money. So they should tell us exactly where the money is.
And I'm curious, at the TUC level, have you engaged at all to find out from government, but you've collected the monies, you've taken the fund from my salaries, you haven't paid, what are you doing with it?
We have engaged.
And what did they tell you?
So the thing is that anytime you engage, we are working on it. And then there's a promise that it will be paid into the various accounts. And as my senior comrade, Kabonu mentioned, it is not just even the tier 2. It's also even the union dues that is supposed to be used in running the unions. You understand? Which have also not been paid. But anytime you engage, government says that they are working on it and they will actually pay the money into the account. That is why at this point in time, the TUC has also lent its support to the declaration by Forum, and that if by the May 2nd, the monies have not been paid, in fact, if by May 30th, April 30th, the money has not been paid, then we will advise ourselves. Government will do an industrial action starting on May 2nd.
Okay, let me clarify that again, because Angel Kabonu talked about Friday being the deadline, I think, but you mentioned 30th. But just to reconcile that for me quickly. Angel, what date is the ultimatum?
No, we will join hands with all labor unions at the end of the month, and we will not want to disturb the May day. So the 2nd of May, as my comrade Dr. Kwabena is saying, is correct, is very right. We will join hands together with all labor unions in the action.
Okay. Franklin, what is really happening? Imani, you've been studying this for a while. You wrote about it copiously. What's happening?
Well, if you know, our part of the story essentially was that, many people fought alongside us, but we essentially liberated the second tier onto the various private fund managers right now. So we have a stake in this particular enterprise called pensions. But I'm surprised. In fact, I thought we've moved on, because what Angel and my good friend Otu are talking about were things that we I mean, how many years ago was this? When my good friend, the former ambassador, High Commissioner to India, some PLA was the MPRA boss, really. I mean, to think that this matters are still playing out, it's quite sad, really. But you see, it is because it's government, and government typically reaps where it does not sow. A lot of these monies are possibly used for all kinds of things that are not even warranted. I mean, these are statutory funds. Once you take them, you remit, you make sure you remit to the various schemes of what's it called, the various pools of funds that are supposed to do. What I think Angel and Kwabena should be asking for is that they should also be asking for penalties. But there's a penalty fee that is supposed to be paid for delayed transmission of these funds. I mean, Section 64 of the Pensions Act 766 clearly states that if whoever is supposed to contribute, whoever is supposed to, if your contributions delay, as in it not being remitted to the very particular scheme, delays, what it means is that whoever is at fault is supposed to pay 3% of the per month of the actual sum that was supposed to be remitted on your behalf. So they should not just be asking for the lump sum that has been delayed. So from June 2023 up to now, or is it from August 2023 up to now, whatever the figures are, they should ensure that they are getting the penalty or what I call the interest added to the original sums as well. So clearly the answer to your question is simple. I mean, government decides that because these are its own workers, it can just treat them anyhow. And that's the problem. So they must have used the money for other things. The worry is that the MPRA is supposed to prevent these kinds of things anyway. The MPRA is not necessarily possibly doing its work properly. Of course, they can only back, but I think clearly there should be some conversations with the government, and especially workers who see that private workers, private employees are doing better on other schemes, on private schemes, whereas the government scheme is just taking their money and then taking them for a ride.
What do you make of the TUC assessment? Dr. Otto makes a point that workers are increasingly now earning less under this new arrangement, compared to what it used to be there. Is there something fundamentally wrong with the current pensions architecture?
I think we were moving forward. I would not really want to say that the previous one was better. I think the challenge here is that once your contributions are delayed and not remitted to the requisite funds that are supposed to generate interest, once it delays, it means you really, as Kwabena suggested or said, once it delays, it means you're going to get lower contributions or benefits. That's plain and simple. That's what it is. I mean, if you're not lucky and you are living in the current economic conditions where your money's worth would have been decimated by inflation, then it means clearly that what Kwabena is saying is that, look, once your employer delays remitting the various schemes these sums, it means your interest gets delayed. The interest on your sums actually get delayed. And if you're not lucky, as I said, if you live in an economy where there's debt exchange and there's inflation and there's currency fluctuation, then clearly you're in trouble. So that's the like us to look at it, really.
Abdullah, let's look at the big picture for a second here. Give me your assessment, because you obviously you at the Africa Center for Retirement Research. How is the Ghanaian worker performing when it comes to his ability to enjoy his pensions, considering all the tiers that we now put in place? Are they better off now, or are they worse off?
Okay, so, thank you. I think the subject we are dealing with right now is just a tip of the iceberg. And we need to broaden the discussion a little bit. The Social Security in Ghana has gone through a number of reforms. You can talk about the Pension Ordinance of 1946. We had the Compulsory Savings Scheme of 1960. Then we had the Social Security Act of 1965. We had the National Redemption Council Decree in 1971. Then we had the PNDC Law 247. We're now running on the three-tier pension system under Act 766. Senate actually came into the picture through the through the NRDC, that is the National Redemption Council Decree in 1971. And so from that point all the way up to this point, the period that Senate was administering the scheme was characterized by a lot of agitations. Workers were basically not happy with the way the scheme was administered. They were not happy with the level of benefits. So they called for liberalization and breaking the monopoly of Senate. I think somewhere in 2004, President Kufuor decided that it's about time I listened to the Ghanaian public, Ghanaian workers. So he set up a pension reform commission in July 2004. The commission submitted its report in March 2006. He issued a white paper in August 2006. He signed it into law in December 2008. The law actually became operational in December 2010. But there were just two objectives of the reforms. Workers were complaining that they were not happy with the way Senate administered the scheme. They were not happy. Benefits were not adequate. That was their concern. So the objective of the reform was to establish uniform rules and regulations for the administration and payment of benefits. It was also to improve retirement income security to Ghanaian workers. After 13 years since the implementation of the Act in 2010, where are we as a country?
That's what we are assessing today, exactly. At the back of the consent.
Yeah, so people actually began retiring on the Act 760, that is the new Pension Act in 2020. When we evaluated the impact, the social economic impact of those who retired in that particular year, we found that about 81% had benefit shortfalls. Benefit shortfalls means what they would have been receiving under the old law was far, far more than what they were actually receiving under the new law.
And why was that?
It's a lot of factors. Regulatory lapses, benefit processing, inefficiencies. We had, delays in investment income, as they have mentioned. As far as the Tier 2 is concerned, it's a defined contribution scheme. So the accumulated benefit at the point of exit is made up of the worker's contribution plus the investment income. So if the investment income does not come in on time, definitely there won't be enough time for contribution to be invested. So definitely it's going to result in low, accumulated benefit. So that is what has resulted in, shortfalls in benefits for those who retired. And of course, we are talking about public sector and private sector workers. If you pick 81 of those who retired in 2020 had benefit shortfalls, you come to 2021, those who retired, you realize that 62% of them had benefit shortfall. And up to this point, people are still recording benefit shortfalls. Now, if you look at it carefully, you realize that it's a combination of factors that I didn't mention. We had, regulatory lapses. The National Pension Regulatory Authority has to do a lot in terms of their regulation.
But Franklin mentions that, but also considering that the government is taking the money, the MPRA is another government agency, you really can expect it to really be effective in checking government.
Exactly. Section 3.3 and Section 3.9 of the Act stipulates that once the employer takes the contribution, he has within up to 14 days in the ensuing month to meet the contribution to the worker.
But they're talking about the fact that it's the last time they paid, for example, was June for Tier 2.
Yeah, that is a clear violation of the Social Security Act. And I have mentioned that Section 3.3 and Section 3.9 stipulates that once the contributions are collected, you take 5.5% from the worker's salary, add 13%, making 18.5%. Take 5%, give it to the Tier 2. Within 14 days, in the next month. That is what the law stipulates. So anything short of that, you are going to shortchange, the worker, because the contribution is not given to the corporate trustee for him to invest, to accumulate enough. So if that is not done, definitely we are going to have the benefit shortfalls that we are talking about. And if you look at the social security space in Ghana, there is just so much. It's not just about those who are retiring. Of course, if you are an active worker, you pass on. Benefit is supposed to be gotten from SNIT. It's supposed to be taken, beneficiaries are supposed to take money from, from the corporate trustee. That is the second tier. In our evaluation, we found that about 98% of those beneficiaries, that is from disease workers, 98% of beneficiaries did not get the money from the Tier 2.
Why?
They didn't know. About 94% at least recorded that they were not aware there is anything like Tier 2. So that is why I'm mentioning that the pension regulator has a lot of work in deepening the provisions of the social security. Social security education in Ghana is very, 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 very low.
It's low. What about the private sector? We were talking about the 700,000 public sector workers. What about the private sector there?
You mean 700,000 workers are agitating that?
Yes, that's the concern we are discussing already, only because the public sector workers are agitating. But in your assessment, how is this impacting the private sector, for example?
Of course, I did mention that the 81% that had benefit shortfalls, about 90% of them were coming from the public sector.
Yes, yes.
And it is due to government delay.
Okay, so that's why they
exactly.
are.
That is why
they're most affected.
Exactly. But in the private sector, somehow, compliance rate is very, very high. The employer takes the contribution, he goes and invests it without any delay. So definitely there will be enough time for them to accumulate benefits for somebody working in it.
Interesting. Angel Kabonu, you've heard already from Franklin making the point that don't just ask them to pay the money, but also demand the penalty that the law clearly prescribes. Is that part of your demand at all?
Yes, yes. At the last meeting we held at the conference room of the Ministry of Labour, that demand was made, that they pay the monies with the penalties prescribed by law. And also make sure that they put in a regime where we don't get back to this situation. Promises were made, but as to whether the promises will be adhered to, it's a different story altogether. But all said and done, we don't think that our government takes the pensions of these people seriously. And maybe we workers are also sick, because we've also not hammered strongly issues on our pension. Can you imagine a situation like this happening in a place like France, and what the workers were going to do on the streets if a situation like this arises in a place?
Yeah, and in France, even the mere attempt by the government to change the retirement age became one that led to protests, led to civil unrest.
Absolutely. That is why I'm also putting some of the blame on our leadership in Labour, that it is high time we take both public and private sector pension issues very, very seriously in this country, because if there is a private sector organization that's also not paying on time or paying timeously and adequately, it affects the whole pension regime and the whole pension portfolio. But on this one, let us state very clearly that we are very serious on this matter. Because you see, when the haircuts occurred, some of the funds that were affected were funds invested by the various schemes. So already investment is affected in areas that definitely is going to affect our people. So we are not relenting on this matter. We will not renege on our responsibilities. Government ought to take us seriously on this matter, because the future, you see, when you are on pension, you become very vulnerable. When you are on pension, it is as if you've been left on in the ledge, and you feel like you do not have people to talk for you, to protect you. So if somebody messes up with your pension, then please, the NPRA should start behaving as an independent authority and to apply the rules. The fact that the boss of NPRA is appointed by the president doesn't mean that he's an appendage of government in power. The NPRA is supposed to start waking up from his slumber and perform its duties guaranteed to it by law, and to be applying the sanctions that is proposed in it by law. Other than that, we are getting nowhere.
I mean, frankly, so if you look at this, how do you begin to resolve this challenge? And clearly, this is not the first time it's happened. We've seen the delay. It's as simple as saying, government, collect and pay. However, government collects and does not pay. There must be something fundamentally wrong somewhere. Why this keeps happening?
Well, as you know, governments are in the habit of just behaving like teenagers with car keys and whiskey with money. Essentially, that's what they do. And so they do not really think about the long-term benefits of these workers anyway. What saddens me really is that we are actually having this conversation again. I've told, and I think my recommendations should also, in addition to the recommendations I made about asking for penalties to be paid or interest to be paid, I think the workers should also go for lawyers. And I think, yes, they should be able to sue the government to make sure that these monies are paid immediately they are received. It's very important. Because you see, if you're a private actor and you fail to pay your Senate contributions, the speed with which you are taken through the court, that 30-day court, you'll be jailed right now if you don't take care, right? So why should the government be the one actually misbehaving? It's not the best. The other thing I think I need to ask Angel and Kabana to do, if the regulator is not doing, is to ensure that the competence of the managers of Senate must also be properly assessed. You see, if the managers of Senate are not competent, it will affect your investment. But they may not be able to make proper investment decisions that will affect your investment rate. As I speak, I'm told, in fact, we are beginning to pick indications that some of the deputies that are being appointed do not have the requisite qualifications at all. But one just was a local, whatever service, Ghana Health Service post. I think she must have been a former DCE or something somewhere. Totally clueless, and she's likely to be made a third deputy deputy director general for operations. That's a huge post. So you need competence, you need competent people to manage that. So they should ask for the competence of everybody working at SNIT right now, top management, and then ask themselves whether these persons can actually make proper investments on their behalf. So it's not just a question of they sitting and looking on and the government just taking the money. But even whatever they receive, how they invest it is actually very important.
So on top of not paying the funds, you're saying there is a management problem here, of the funds once collected?
Because if you look at the management, and you should be able to tell. Look, I don't want to bring personalities into this conversation, but I deal with a private fund guys, and these guys, I've known them from day one, and they are competent. Anytime I meet them, you could tell they are making decisions based on science and data, right? I could mention their name if they wish me to do so. Access Pensions, by the way. Exceedingly great professionals. I can't say the same of maybe the current structure as we speak, but we should be able to find out what they are actually doing as SNIT, especially the current crop that are there. We should find out their competences, whatever they've done before in terms of investing people's money, and then get to know that, because it's also a function of how much you can get. So when Kabna is saying that, well, today whatever they receive is lower than the previous, I thought that the point really is that we are going forward, and I think people benefit a lot more, even though the economic conditions may be a little better. But on top of that, is the quality of the investment. If the persons there are not qualified, and I'm calling on the Evans to go and ask for the competence of especially the deputy director generals. Another insidious thing that we have seen in the law at 7766 is that I think section 45, I think, talks about the appointment of limitless numbers of deputy generals. And these deputy generals, deputy director generals, positions don't come cheap at all. They take a humongous sums of money. If the person is not qualified, it means it's a drain on the purse, and it's a drain on worker contributions. And it's important that we question the value addition to workers' pensions if they are so remitted that way, that much. These are all functions of how much you get at the end of the day. So it's not just a question of they not getting their due or being the government not paying. Even whatever is paid, the way they invest it, the person investing on your behalf, you must also find out whether they are competent to do so. And we should put a limit to that number. I think it was Mama who started appointing 3 deputies. All of a sudden, it's maintained. I'm sure the next guy will appoint 4 or 5 or 10 deputies. And it's there, section 45, I can read it to you. It says, the president may choose to appoint many deputy generals as he deems fit. Why should you do that when you are using workers' money? Why do you have to appoint limitless persons, and on top of them, they are not even qualified? What is this?
Let me bring in Dr. Otu on that point. Dr. Otu, does the TUC share the same concerns about how the SNIT is managing the pensions? That, of course, comes from you. And just put it in context. Just recently, we've seen that there's been a change at the top at SNIT. The chief executive, whether he was fired, he was resigned, he was removed. A new one is currently in place, a deputy who was used to be there. Are you happy with the way this whole thing has been managed and the current crop of individuals heading that institution?
Of course, the TUC cannot be happy with the way SNIT has been managed over the years and now. If you are not personalizing it, we have seen many of the investments that have gone wrong. Check all the SNIT buildings around Ridge area. Some of them built with workers' funds, money. They are now empty. Nobody is even renting them. So it means our investment money has gone wrong. All those that took those decisions, they have really let down workers. And these are decisions by SNIT. So when you see the current happenings in SNIT, it doesn't give you comfort. We are likely to repeat and even get worse some of the decisions we have taken over the years. So we are really not happy. In fact, at some point, the TUC has even questioned why the appointment of Director General should be made by the President in the first place.
Who do you want to make that appointment? Who do you want to make that appointment?
The organized labor should have a role to play because these are workers' money. And the person superintending over the management of that money, we should have a say in who that person is, his competencies and the things we want that person to do. So we have actually made recommendation in that regard. And it's informed by the fact that we are not happy with the way appointments are made, regardless of people's competencies. And then also it introduces political meddling in the decisions that are supposed to be purely financial and supposed to purely secure the interest of Ghanaian workers. We don't see it that way. But let me talk about a few other things Kabonu and the other panelists have said. If you take, for example, the private pension, the private sector, and its contribution to the Tier 2, Abdullah Mashoud mentioned the evaluation he has done. In fact, he did it with the TUC. We actually commissioned that evaluation. One of the things we realize is that if you take the private sector, today, most of them are actually remitting SNIT without remitting the second tier. Part of the reason is that SNIT has a mechanism for enforcing. So SNIT can take you to court. But NPRA, who is supposed to enforce the Tier 2 pension, is actually not enforcing it. So many people, the private sector in particular, are not actually remitting at all. So again, it reinforces the fact that we are likely to have benefit shortfalls longer into the future than we had actually anticipated. Now, he mentions the fact that many people retire, they take the small pension from SNIT, and particularly those in the private sector, they don't go to their Tier 2 to take the pension, particularly for the survivors. If the main contributor has died, the survivors don't go because they are not aware. And he's mentioned the fact that many people, we have not educated many people. In fact, the evaluation report he presented shows that part of the growth of the private Tier 2 pension is attributed to the fact that many of the people that are supposed to claim have not claimed, and is actually adding to the growth of the Tier 2 pension. It means that we need a lot of education. And I come back to the point Kabonu makes. For many of our members grappling with daily challenges of high inflation, high prices, pension and retirement is a distant variable for them. It's hard towards the unions who have taken their dues and who are working on their behalf to take out this mantle and make sure that the right things are done. We should use our representation on the SNIT board. We should use our representation on the NPRA board to good effect. But at the end of the day, we should be able to be on the neck of government, and we have to be on the street for 3 days like they do in Paris or France. We should be able to do that, all in the interest of Ghanaian workers. Finally, as I conclude, Franklin mentioned the fact that if you don't pay your contribution, you are charged with a percentage. In fact, I want to read the law, section 64 of the law. It says that If a contribution is not paid within the specified period, a sum equal to 3% per month of the contribution payable shall be added to the contribution as a penalty. We've never applied this. And in fact, for government, if all the 700,000 contributions from June to date, we are applying the percentage, they will see the effect.
And this is going to be part of the demand now.
It should be the part of the demand. In fact, Kabunu explained that it is part of
the demand. Yeah.
I think we should insist on it. Insisting on it does two things. It makes sure that the workers' contribution, we just don't pay the contribution because it has to be invested. So we claw back those investments using that 3%. But it also serves as a punishment to government that the next time they deduct the money, if they don't want to pay the charge, they will remit it accordingly. And probably we should also extend it to the union dues.
Yeah, but to do that, Franklin suggests you need to get your lawyers involved.
Of course, exactly. We will do that. But sometimes it's not just the lawyers. We also need to hit the street if you have to do that to back our demands. You do what you need.
Angel, are we going to see you hitting the streets?
Absolutely, if they renege on their responsibility, if they fail us on the promise they made to us that they are going to pay the monies, if the 2nd of May comes and we realize that they have just given us a red herring, then they should expect us to take a very serious action on behalf of our workers and the future of our workers. We are not going to compromise on this at all. And this misbehavior should stop in our country, where statutory monies are collected and they are not remitted to the designated institutions. It's affected GET Fund, it's affected health funds, it's affected district assembly, common fund. I mean, every dedicated fund is affected by this misbehavior of the politician, and we cannot allow this to continue.
Okay. So, Abdullah, as we wrap up, though, there's a lot have been said about management of the pension schemes yourself, and then what your own data showed. How much of what you found is attributable to the poor management of the scheme?
Okay, so the biggest risk facing social security in Ghana and the Ghanaian retiree is political risk.
Okay.
There is so much interference within the space. Most of the government actions is not inuring to the benefit of the Ghanaian retiree. And I like the call from the other panelists talking about the assessment of those who are appointed into such positions. Social security is a serious business, and that is how it is handled in other parts of the world. But when you come here in Africa and in Ghana, you realize that they just pick anybody. Once the person contributed to the success of the party, they just throw the person into the free, regardless whether the person has a requisite background or not. I think recently we saw the Buhari Hasnit, where the Director General was sacked or,
Yep.
I had a lot of comments from the public space, from civil society organizations, but we left out the most important ones.
Which is what?
You have to look at, how much, there are indicators you have to look at. You have to look at the investment policy guidelines and the investment outcomes of the social security. You have to look at income expenditure dynamics, and in that case, you are looking at the reserves. You are looking at the growth of various indicators. Those are some of the areas we need to be looking at when we are really assessing the performance of a particular Director General.
If you look at it, what's your conclusion?
Yes, if you ask me, based on social security indicators, you're talking about investment outcomes, you are talking about income expenditure, you are looking at administrative costs, I'll give the past Director General 5 out of 10. And
that's average?
Yes. If we are going to look at the data.
Okay.
Now, of course, every 3 years, we have to get external actuaries to come into the country and assess the health of the scheme. In 2014, when the actual evaluation was done, we were made to understand that the SNP scheme is unable to pay benefits fully and on time by 2042. 3 years later, in 2017, another actual evaluation done by ILO, they came into the country, did another actual evaluation, and did indicate to policymakers and government that, look, Remember, we warned you in 2014. The scheme will not be able to pay benefit by 2042 in 2014. Now in 2017, it came down to 2037.
2037?
2037. That is 5 years down. As we speak, another actual valuation was put out in January this year, and the figure has come down to 2036.
So wait a minute. So this actuarial study says that by 2036,
yes,
SNIT will not be able to pay contributions.
It will not be able to pay benefits fully and on time. The reserves would have...
Okay, it's not able to pay benefits fully and on time.
It is because the reserves would have depleted. That is, if nothing is done. And they have made a lot of recommendations in the actual valuation report. The Director General has the mandate to drive the provisions or the recommendations of the actual valuation report. We haven't seen anything like that. Even while, across the world, people are reforming pensions in order to, to improve the long-term sustainability of schemes, we are sleeping here in Africa and in Ghana. I have a recommendation that whenever actual valuation is put out, Parliament needs to be very, very interested. The Director General by law... Are
these published documents that are available?
It's one of the documents that is clearly hidden from the public.
Okay. But shouldn't it be published? Shouldn't the workers have a copy?
You mean workers in Senate or...
No, I mean stakeholders, like the workers, like the Angel Kabonu and the TUC.
They are supposed to have copies, but I doubt if they have copies.
Let me ask Dr. Otu, do you have a copy of this latest actual study that was done?
I don't have the copy, and that is the point I said, that we should utilize our membership on the Senate board.
Yeah, but it's shocking, isn't it? You have members on the Senate board. An actual study has been done, and you don't have it. Angel Kabonu, have you seen a copy?
Absolutely not. They did not even announce whether
they were doing it.
And this says by 2036, they will be struggling to pay full benefits.
Exactly. If nothing is done. And they have made recommendations.
Sorry, Franklin.
It's not rocket science. I mean, if clearly speaking, government is not paying already, that's half of your contributions gone anyway. And secondly, if the options to invest once you are receiving are also limited, and they are not doing proper investments because the politician is also interfering. Clearly, it tells you that the funds will dwindle anyway. So even without seeing the actuarial work, it's clear that by 2030, probably even 2030, we will not be able to do proper social security networking. And I think they need to go and learn what happened in, was it Peru? When people, I mean, there's pension experts who have managed that country's pensions very, very, very well.
And see, I need to quickly ask the workers. Kabunu, 30 seconds. Are you going to demand for this study? Because that tells you where your pensions are and what they are going to be, what's going to happen to them. Are you going to demand that?
We have to demand it and make it public.
Dr. Otu?
Absolutely. I mean, it says something about our representation on these institutions. You understand? So we definitely have to get hold of these actuarial studies. But as Franklin said, it's really not rocket science. Government is not remitting, and the investments are not doing well. If you read SNET annual report and their investment portfolios, you realize that sometimes they can go as low as a 2% return on their investment.
Wow.
In a country where interest rate is that much high.
Well,
okay. The risk-free rate, of course.
And time is up on this. Give me one quick 30 seconds. What do you want to see from everything you know now?
Okay, so so much has happened in the space.
What is the single most important thing that must change tonight? If anything must change at all?
Regulation.
Okay. Strengthen it.
Strengthen the regulation.
And give the MPRA bite.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you very much. Listen, this is a conversation we have to revisit, and we are going to be chasing that actuarial study ourselves, trying to understand what's happening with my funds, with yours as well. And good rest of the evening.